What was she to do? What was to become of them? Besides herself, there were 9 of them left. The eldest, Jimmy, was only 10, and the youngest, here in her arms, was but 11 months. How was she going to feed them? She didn't think about housing them. Her father had been bonded by the year, and the house was part of the contract. As if the thought of food had been conveyed to the child, it started to whine, and she shook it up and down in her arms, saying under her breath, "Shh, there now. Shh, there now. Shh, shh," while all the time she stared at her parents. Last week, Farmer Hetherington had let them have all the turnips they could eat, and 2 quarts of skimmed milk a day. But she was sensible enough to know that the farmer's generosity was forthcoming only because he expected her father to be back at work this week. A section of her mind, planning ahead, thought, perhaps he'll take Jimmy on the farm, not just stone-picking or crow-scaring. But on this, she sighed, knowing there was little chance, as they were standing grown men off all around. "Cissie?" She looked down at the child tugging at her skirt and whispered, "What is it?" And Charlotte, aged 5, her brown eyes wide, her lips trembling, said, "I'm gonna be sick." On this, Cissie's eyes ranged helplessly around the half-circle of children, all facing the bed. Jimmy, Mary, William, Bella, Sarah, Charlotte, Jo, and Annie, in that order. Then, her eyes coming to rest on Charlotte again, she hitched Nellie further up into her arms before she said softly, "Go down to the burn and get a drink. You go with her, Sarah. Go to the clean part, mind, where it comes out of the rock. Don't go near the river, mind, nor even to put your feet in." The river, Parson Headley said, was where you caught the fever. Sarah, a year older than Charlotte, nodded her thin face, so like that of the man lying on the bed. Then, taking her sister by the hand, she went towards the door. And as she reached it, it opened, and a woman entered, and going up to Cissie said under her breath, "Get rid of the lot of them. Here's Matthew Turnbull from Benham come over to measure them." Cissie looked at Mrs. Fisher, who acted as midwife and layer out of the dead, not only for Heatherbrook, but also for the other hamlets within a radius of 3 miles, and she nodded her head once. Then, turning to Jimmy, she said, "See to them, Jimmy, will you?" And he, as if marshalling a flock of sheep, spread his arms wide and guided the silent children through the doorway and past the big, broad fellow who was standing waiting to come in. Matthew Turnbull had to stoop his head to get into the room, and he sniffed audibly and coughed as he glanced towards the bed. Then he turned and looked at the girl with the child in her arms. At this point, Mrs. Fisher, twisting her apron straight on her hip, said, "Ah, well, I'll leave you to make your own arrangements." She nodded from one to the other, then went out. Cissie looked at the man. She hadn't seen him before. Mr. Proctor, the carpenter who usually made the coffins for Roundabout, had died of the fever 3 days ago. She swallowed deeply before she asked, "How much do you charge?" He stared at the lint-white face before him, the 2 round brown eyes seeming to be lost in their sockets, the nut-coloured hair sticking wet to the forehead, the child's hand alternately opening and shutting over the point of the small breast beneath the faded print bodice, the bodice and skirt themselves hanging as if on a clothes prop, so thin she was. They had told him that she had been left with 9 bairns to see to. Well, she wouldn't manage that for long. The workhouse gates would open wide for the lot of them. It was the first time he had seen her, but not the first time he had heard her name. Parson Headley had mentioned the name now and again to him. "Joe Brody," he had said. "There's a man who would have done things given the chance. And a compassionate man," he had said. Had he not found his wife when she was 12 years old, working in a coal pit in West Riding? She was a distant relation of his, half-cousin, but he had brought her from that life, and not only brought her, he had bought her from her people.